All right, this is the Oakmont Sunday Symposium again, and we are delighted today to have two of our regional media leaders with us to talk about local and regional media. Darren is the CEO and president of Northern Cal Public, and that includes KRCB, which is our local version of PBS. It also includes our local version down on the peninsula of public broadcasting, which he'll probably talk about. And Rollie Atkinson. Rollie is the owner of Sonoma West Publishers, which is built around the Healdsburg Tribune, Sonoma West Times, and other print media that goes out that direction. And of course, in our modern day, his print media has become mostly online media. With that in mind, we thought we would start with each of them taking about 10 minutes or so to speak what's on their mind, and then we'll go into a little moderated session, which I will run for about another 10 minutes, and then we'll go to questions and answers. So with that in mind, Rollie, you want to take the first run at this?
Sure, I'd be happy to introduce Sonoma West Publishers to everyone who may not know exactly the entity. It's a company owned by my wife and I for 25 years. And we were founded in 1995. And over that period of time, we've acquired small legacy community newspapers in Sonoma County, the oldest being the Healdsburg Tribune, which has been in publication since 1865. The Cloverdale Reveille, it's been publishing since 1879. Our Sonoma West Times and News, which was born as the Sebastopol Times and first published in August of 1889, and the Windsor Times, which is only 37 years old, but predates the town of Windsor by 5 years. We brought those all together because the survival strategy 2 decades ago was to bring small newspapers together to share scales of economy, and that worked well for those two decades and until quite recently. Sonoma West Publishers we have 16 full-time employees, 7 serve in our newsroom and are journalists. We operate on about a 1.3 million budget until COVID pandemic put a hole in that. And right now, today, I couldn't tell you what the budget is. It's almost day to day. I want to get to the critical issues that might be on everyone's mind about the future of newspapers, the future of news, the future of journalism. Not talk so much about our organization, but I'm happy to take any questions about that. But what we're facing is, what the telegraph invention, what radio, what TV threatened to do to newspapers, but didn't do, the internet and the social media giants, Facebook and Google, are now doing. They are killing newspapers. They're killing journalist jobs. But you can't blame just those internet giants. A lot of the blame belongs to the owners of the newspapers who went through a lot of denial. A lot of it responsibility belongs to readers and consumers of news. What journalists have always failed to do is really tell their story and self-promote. It just seemed to be in our belief and makeup to not advertise for ourselves, not promote ourselves. And here we are. And what I found out through this historic moment, looking back at how we got here and going back even a century, American newspapers were supported by advertising in a value transaction that was really an accidental mistake, lie, or a joke. Advertisers like tobacco, beer, and car companies, they never cared about freedom of the press or quality journalism. They just wanted a big audience, and they wanted sales. Because newspapers just dipped out of that honey bucket, the readers and subscribers got really cheap and subsidized subscription rates as newspapers just got fat on that print advertising. So You know, us newspaper publishers today are faced with that economy where people think the news is almost free or only cost a quarter or $1 an issue. Or in the Sonoma West Publishers case, we charge $60 a year for, you know, the most local news you can get anywhere from Cloverdale, Healdsburg, Windsor to West County. It's quite a deal. It's quite an offer. That's much cheaper than a cup of coffee a day, cheaper actually than a cup of coffee a week, really. So we went through a whole century. We failed to see this false arrangement. And then when the internet came about, we started giving all of our news away for free. We thought that was the way to compete with the internet, was to start giving all of our original content and hard work away for free. Well, I mean, a few of us look back and figure out how stupid was that as a business arrangement. You know, it's like being a restaurant and, you know, serving all your food every night for free. I mean, it was just a poor business decision, and we're reeling from that still today. We should have been asking readers all along for more support that we've only recently come to. You readers of the newspapers are taking our work for granted, and the local communities in Sonoma County and everywhere have assumed that the local newspaper would just always be there and it would last forever. Now we see that the opposite is happening, and for those that follow the industry, and I gather there are several of you, based on the backgrounds I just heard about, you would know about this. But in the last 8 years, and this is a documented, famous report that's being passed around out of the School of Journalism at the University of North Carolina, the data shows that in the last 8 years, 1,800 newspapers have died, gone out of business in America. Half of every newsroom journalism job is now gone in that same time period. Half of every newspaper job is gone forever. And they didn't go somewhere else and continue to do news. I have former reporters, I can count more than four that now work for county and state government as PIO, public information officers, public relations folks. They're not doing news. They're making better money than a journalist, but they're getting paid to spin the news. Newspapers and journalists aren't the only victims, obviously. We're all victims. Readers are victims. We face the loss of our democracy and the frontline defenders of facts and the truth. Now, this is not an entirely pessimistic story. There are a lot of small little startups out there blooming right now. They're all digital based. They're all small, neighborhood based, local, hyper local startups. They're getting lots of support from grants from Poynter Institute and the Knight Foundation and large entrepreneurs like that. They're small but mighty, and we're building a new network. And Sonoma West Publishers is part of that, because our new model, which is favored by many newspapers and publishers, are converting from a for-profit model based on advertising sales and commercial for-profit transactions to a nonprofit model that allows for more community-based support, community donations, philanthropy, grant writing. And that's why last January, almost a year ago, January 25, we incorporated our nonprofit, the Sonoma County Local News Initiative, which over the course of this year, 2021, will transition into leadership and ownership of the legacy newspapers that Sonoma West Publishers has put together that have a unending, continuing publication and service of news for 156 years. We feel very confident in our new sustainable model. It's based on a few major points, those being staying focused on hyper local news, switching to digital for the news. Print is, in my mind, it's dead, it's dying, it's virtually dead. Digital has many great attributes. Um, there are dark sides to it, but we don't represent that. That's Google and Facebook and those guys. Uh, our nonprofit is out actively doing fundraising and getting donations from folks like you and other local foundations and grantees. Um, Readers need to understand the value of local news. They need to start paying for what it's really worth. If there are households willing to pay $100 a month to Comcast and AT&T to get 300 plus TV channels that they don't even watch, they could surely pay somewhat of an amount for local news that actually matters and impacts their life. So we charge $60 a year, and Comcast, AT&T are charging $100 a month. That we need to claim our fair share of that reader revenue. Another major strategy of ours is collaboration. Newspapers all across America now don't look at themselves as competitors as they once do. Not even when we scoop, or not even to compete for advertising. There are great collaborative models emerging all across the country, and Darren and I have been talking for over a year on collaborating, and we have collaborated. We've collaborated on projects that have won awards in the journalism industry. The money we receive for local news stays in the community. It contributes to the public good, and that's the model a nonprofit can do. The nonprofit news is a public trust. It's no longer a for-profit commercial entity, and that's the new footing that Sonoma West Publishers and Sonoma County Local News Initiatives doing. A lot of what we're doing is, we're kind of adopting the model of National Public Radio and PBS. Eternal pledge drives, asking the community for support, asking the users to pay what they think we're worth, and to not take us for granted. So I'll just close with this. The pandemic has just really hit us in the head. We launched in January, and in March, the local economy shut down. Public events were closed. The festivals we love to cover, the Apple Blossom, Gravenstein, Citrus Fair, those didn't happen. And that's where the community comes together and celebrates itself. And it's where small businesses support one another in those celebratory times. And it's where nonprofits can't raise the money they're used to with live auctions and crab feeds and those types of event during now. So, they were having trouble even as they were established over decades to continue fundraising. And our nonprofit, Sonoma County Local News Initiative, had to do a startup and introduce itself to the community in the middle of this, and what's now become a pretty deep recession. And we don't see the end of it until we get almost 1 million vaccinations. Yes, it will take 1 million vaccinations in Sonoma County for the 500,000 residents. So let me pause there. I'd like to get in as many questions as I can later after Darren gives his update.
Okay, Darren, you're on.
Yeah, my name's Darren LaShelle, and I'm president and CEO of NorCal Public Media. So Northern California Public Media is a recent moniker for us. It's about 3 years old now. And, KRCB TV, PBS affiliate, went on the air in 1984. And then we followed in 1994 with KRCB FM radio here in Sonoma County. And in 2017, we added KPJK, which is the former KCSM out of San Mateo, PBS member station. And so at that time, we were like, well, we are certainly more than Sonoma County right now, and we need to reflect that. So that's where the NorCal moniker came from. And I thought it was going to take 5 to 10 years to catch on. I was looking at the long game, but here we are 3 years into it, and pretty much every piece of correspondence we get from the public, they reference us as NorCal. So I think that branding has been has been working out for us. So those are our three broadcast entities. Channel 22 here in the North Bay, 91.1 FM here in Sonoma County, and then Channel 60 in San Mateo. KRCB is a PBS member station. 91.1 is a NPR member station, and Channel 60 in San Mateo is an unaffiliated educational television channel. So KCSM had dropped their membership in PBS prior to selling the channel. And so that created a problem for us. We were unable to wrestle that back or claw that back from public television, as it were. So, but it's working out very, very well. We're learning a lot about covering two centers in two very different places, up here in the North Bay and then down in the San Jose, San Mateo area. So before COVID, I was actually spending most of my time down there trying to create partnerships and shore up our visibility. So it's been more difficult in the Zoom, the age of Zoom and the age of COVID. So we're a membership model, as Rollie alluded to there, and we always have been. And so we have about 10,000 members throughout the Bay Area. And if you look at our membership as an organization, the vast majority of the membership is outside of Sonoma County, even though we are centered in Sonoma County, with the bulk of that actually being in the city and the East Bay region, sort of in a crescent shape around there. Of course, the South Bay is growing in leaps and bounds because we're paying a lot of attention to them, and we need to do that. So the membership model for us is still growing. And I will be very honest, though, if we hadn't acquired Channel 60 in San Mateo, we probably would be flat or maybe a little bit in decline. But because we added that station, it's growing from basically a foundation of zero, right? So we had nowhere to go but up with that channel. And so that's been a good thing for us financially and as a member organization, but it also stretches us further because we need to satisfy those folks who live in those areas with content that is meaningful to them. It would be disingenuous of me to pretend that we exist in a vacuum, because KQED is the dominant factor in this market. And so KQED as a public TV and a public radio entity, is the most watched and the most listened to, not only public media entity, but often the #1 radio station in all of the Bay Area. So, it is not a small thing for us to try to carve out some kind of identity in that huge sphere of influence and recognition that KQED has. Our relationship is what I would call moderately good. We do speak. I just spoke Friday to their CEO, and we try to do that every couple of months and catch up with each other. But it is a competitive situation, and that's just to be expected. But the relationship is a good one, and we do communicate with each other. So there's no real animus there of any kind. The other recent situation that you may have heard of is that our radio station since 1994 has been very, very small. It's strong in Healdsburg and Windsor, and very weak in Santa Rosa. So we added a booster in downtown Santa Rosa that gives us pretty good coverage of the city, but you have to switch over to 90.9 to hear it. It's been a very difficult situation for us for decades. And so last week we inked a deal with Amatoro Sonoma Media to purchase 104.9. And so the 104.9 frequency is going to give us full coverage of Sonoma County. Also, we spill over, as it were, into the Calistoga, St. Helena area, and also into Novato. So it's going to give us a much larger footprint than we've had on the radio station before. And so we're really ramping up for that. We brought in a new head of radio. We've hired a new news team. So we have 4 people on the ground instead of 1.5 people, which is what we had before. And so, we're looking forward to to serving the community in a bigger way once the FCC approves that transfer, which should be somewhere in March if all goes well. And the Biden administration has assured our FCC lawyers that the change in administration isn't going to slow that process down, because the FCC is a fairly stable organization, even though their chairman is stepping down and being replaced. So that's good news for us. So I'll wrap up here with just talking about some of the content streams that we follow on a regular basis. We do a lot of environmental reporting. We have a program called Bay Area Bountiful, which is a TV and radio series that we do, which, always a bridesmaid. We've gotten like 11 Emmy nominations for this series, but we haven't won one yet. So I'm like, keep trying for that. And also we distribute environmental programming on a national level. We do The New Environmentalist to PBS stations across the country that's hosted by Robert Redford. And we're working on a series with NHK, World Japan, which is a Japanese American series that looks at the environment. So, and then we have an NPR podcast called Living Downstream, which won Best Podcast of the Year last year. For small stations, they do 2 tiers, so you don't have to compete against the big guys. So that was good news for us. And also we're talking a lot internally and with Rollie and others about how we can tackle what we call media literacy, for how people consume information and news, how they can find trusted information for news. And there's never been a more frustrating time for the media than right now, where a large chunk of the population of our nation is believing, sharing, and thinking things that simply are not factually based. And it was kind of funny maybe 4 years ago, but it certainly isn't funny anymore. And, there are big ramifications on our society, on our politics, on our government, for what's happening, the way people consume news or don't consume news. So that's a big issue that we need to tackle as a public media organization. And I'm talking to other PBS stations across the country, as well as local media folks like Rollie, to try to figure out how to do that. So that's just a thumbnail sketch. And like Rollie, I enjoy questions more than just talking. So I would be thrilled to do that.
Well, let me start. Darren, am I correct? Isn't KRCB FM available on my Alexa device?
It is, right. Yeah, and that's a good point, is that, even KRCB TV is also available for streaming, right? Online or on our free app. And the radio station is available on the app and also on any device that you have. You can ask it to play that.
Okay, I want to ask both of you, have you all had conversations between you or with others on the idea of a regional, let me call it website, but single place you go for regional news? Okay, one of the great frustrations I find anyway is that you start looking for news and you suddenly find yourself having to go on to a gazillion different websites, okay, to get current news or what's going on. Have you considered anything like that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The answer is yes on that. I think that, Rollie and I, in our conversations, we haven't gotten that far in what the future may hold for us. I think the unknown factor of the Press Democrat, is always out there, and how they would participate or be a part of that. But I think you're right. It is very frustrating. And Rollie, you can speak to that as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, Darren's organization and our organization are both participating members of Cal Matters, which is a statewide organization of news gatherers, largely based in Sacramento, but it's disparate all over the entire state. And they have a 40-member newsroom that does statewide coverage, but also our discussion yesterday with Cal Matters between me and 2 of my editors was how to more localize that. By example, during the wildfire coverage, Cal Matters was at 30,000 feet, swooping over the entire state, covering hundreds of wildfires and interviewing CAL FIRE professionals, leadership in Sacramento. And we had more particular specific information from the CAL FIRE crews here on the ground in Sonoma County. So we talked about how we can do a kind of a two-way street of localizing that news and building that network. And that's one example. There are just very briefly, it's one of the things I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of talk in our industry about creating a new news ecosystem. Getting into collaboration and away from the competition. And a lot of the funding from the philanthropy groups is going to creating these new ecosystems. Cal Matters being one of them. LA, there's an organization called the Institute for Nonprofit News, which our nonprofit is a prospective member of, and there's 300 members there, all networking together across the country. There's a statewide organization in Colorado, the Colorado News Project. There are 38 news rooms participating in that. There's another one that started even sooner before that in New Jersey, and they're even funded by state funds. The state government has blessed that project and is putting public funding into it. So, so you're right, George. I mean, I think this is a big part of the future model for news. If you want to be part of that network and you want to be a journalist that plays, that participates, then you just have to learn how to do accurate news, check your sources, and keep it honest. And everyone else, we don't want them in the room.
Darren, you want to add anything to that?
We have a professional organization of the public TV and public radio stations. And, we're also talking about the same things here at the same time. So, I mean, this is in the air and the water right now, right, is how to do this. Everyone wants to, of course, remain their own independent entity. That's, we're all in this for that. But, how do we collaborate for the public to have sort of a gateway or a clearinghouse or what have you? An aggregator, I think, is the popular term people are using right now, to be able to more easily get that information. And from a nonprofit news perspective, working with other nonprofits, is what we feel comfortable doing. So, perhaps with Cal Matters and nonprofit print, like Sonoma West is becoming, we're going to be able to move in that direction.
Okay. Rollie, as you've had to move more and more to online, have you been able to transition your existing employees, or do you find there's a problem there?
No, there's a learning curve, absolutely. But our staff is primarily young and energetic. Several are recently from journalism schools in college where they were learning and being taught a lot of these new skills and technology. They're doing quite well. I mean, we're very, very active on social media. We're no longer a once a week print publication. We produce news and disseminate news daily via newsletters. And actually, with the use of our social media feeds, we're posting news several times a day. So it's almost like a live feed or a radio station. If we have news breaking, we put it up. I covered a economic forum on Thursday morning that the county holds every year, and by noon, my story was on our website. Typically, 2 years ago, the readers would have had to wait 8 days to read that. So, yeah, there's new tools and tricks every day. We really have to stay nimble with it. I mean, who knew we'd be zooming, zooming our butts off in 2020.
Darren, I'll give you a sales pitch here. Would you explain to us why, if we've been just because that's the way we grew up, KQED subscribers, we might as well just switch our subscription to KRCB?
Well, I certainly think that you should, but don't do it on, my advice or any kind of marketing and promotions that we may push at you. Do it because you believe in it, and do it because what you see, you feel is of value, right? So one thing that we have wrestled with over the years, and this always happens in a market where there are two PBS stations or multiple NPR stations, is identity confusion. And so I would ask people to think about how much time you spend with us, and put a price tag on that, mentally for yourself. And also do remember that, we are the local entity, who's based here in Sonoma County, and the stronger we are, the more we're going to be able to do. So, withholding because maybe we're not quite where you want us to be, we'd rather be in a conversation with you as a member and as somebody that we can talk to and engage with, than perhaps to not know what's expected of us from your perspective. We'd rather be in that conversation. But to the confusion point, this happens to me all the time. I'll give you an example. Right before COVID, we had an event at the Rialto Theater, and a lady came up to me and she said, "Well, who are you? What are you all about?" And I said, "Well, we're KRCB, NorCal Public Media, and we're hosting this screening event." And she said, "Oh, I didn't know. I'm not familiar with you." And she said, "Are you like KQED?" And I said, "Well, we are very similar to KQED. We do different programs and a lot of the same ones." And she said, "Well, I'm a KQED person." And I said, "Okay, that's fine. Tell me some of the things that you watch and what do you like about them?" And she started listing shows that only we have. And yeah, and that KQED does not have, and that they do not purchase, because we actually do coordinate our purchases with KQED. Because it's a big deal to buy a TV show for 1 year for $10,000 or $20,000, and we don't want to be wasting our money going up against each other with a lot of that material. And so here she's been watching us for many, many years, but even with the logos, even with the branding, even with the on-air stuff, it still didn't break through because KQED is such a dominant force. They have sort of branded themselves as the PBS station. So that's still a hurdle that we're working on.
Okay, well, you've got at least 40 people here who are listening.
Good.
Okay, we're going to open up to questions, and Lynn has the first question, if I might, and then we'll go to Ernie.
Yeah, I imagine that both print and broadcast media have editorial boards that would set the agenda for what gets printed, what gets broadcast, and they would determine the value system. So my question to you both is, who comprises your editorial board? Who determines what goes out and with what kind of a perspective?
Rollie, why don't you take that first?
My answer is going to get me in trouble. I'm pretty much the editorial board of our 4 newspapers, and I write the lead opinion piece every week. We do consult in the newsroom, but primarily, I've been in the industry 47 years, and I learned early, probably day one, that the biggest skill a journalist must have is listening, and being an expert professional listener. So when we set our editorial positions, and we don't do harsh endorsements, we try to explain issues a little deeper. When we, like pre-election, we don't endorse candidates, but if there are tax measures on the board or statewide initiatives, we get into a little more detail as expert researchers and explain what those are. But a lot of that is totally informed and educated by the audience and the listeners. People don't believe this, but I'm a publisher. So I've been an owner for 25 years, of newspapers. I can print whatever I damn well please, until I get sued for libel. And I've only been sued once, and I wasn't convicted. But I can print whatever I damn well please, and I don't have to print anything I don't want. But there are countless times, and almost weekly, when there's news in my newspaper that I don't agree with, or just rather not read, but it gets printed anyway.
Mm. And on the broadcast side, Lynn, we have a bunch of different levels of sort of oversight, at different levels of granularity. So we have a nonprofit community board of directors that, are the owner operators of this community asset as a nonprofit. I am hired by them and I report to them, the board of directors. And so they meet on a monthly basis, and our senior management team, keeps them up to date on the projects that we're doing and what we're doing. And we do have open discussions about, what is our mission? What should we be doing in these communities as an organization? And just as a side note, we are working on board development right now of expanding that board, because our board is all 100% Sonoma County people. And we need to be thinking of a broader area. So there's the board of directors, then there's what we have called the Community Advisory Council. This is mandated by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, that you have a separate group of community members who can give you insight into what they think are the important topics and issues within the community that need to be looked at. And that group is about 10 to 15 people, and it turns over, on a regular basis. There's 2 years terms, and they're staggered. So people are coming and going in every year. So we always get fresh perspectives from that, what we call the CAC. So that's sort of a direct line right into our folks. But then when you look at our management level, we have myself, and then we have the executive producer of television and the executive producer of radio, as well as the news director. And so those folks, as well, on a more granular level, then start talking about exactly what are we going to cover and how are we going to cover it based on the big picture that we got from our board. And then when you get down to the reporters themselves, they're mostly carrying out tasks. But, we still make sure that everybody's understands what the topics are that we're looking to do. How the news department does it is up to them, because we try to keep a very strong wall between management and news, so there isn't any interference there as well.
Okay, we have a question from Ernie, and then from Darrell, and then from Lynn.
Yes, I'm curious to know whether either of our guest speakers pays any attention to Deutsche Welle. There is the only consistent every day of the week 2-hour-long program can be found on Deutsche Welle. And there's a mixture of programming. It's both news and documentaries and science projects and international emphasis, as well as the coverage of the weather in various parts of the world. I'm finding that I'm spending more and more time watching Deutsche Welle than I am in KQED or either of our local resources.
Yeah. Do you remember what channel you are watching when you're watching Deutsche Welle?
Yes, on 32.
32. What's your cable system?
That's Sonic.
Sonic. Oh, okay. Okay. I'm just wondering if you're watching us or not, because we carry Deutsche Welle as a 24-hour feed, and that emanates out of our channel 60. So I know on Comcast cable here, I think it's like 198 or something. But so as a broadcaster, we do air it 24 hours a day on its own channel. And then we also air the half-hour evening news from Deutsche Welle on KRCB and on KPJK both. On the radio side, we don't currently have any Deutsche Welle radio presence on our channel right now, but they are a good resource.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Darrell, you want to add the question?
Yes, I was wondering about, this is for Darren, You bought, it was KCSM's radio channel, 91.1 FM. As I recall, that was a pure FM station at the time, was it not?
Right. So we did not buy their FM station. We bought their radio station. I mean, their television station, which is channel 60. TV.
I thought you said you also had 91.1.
We do. The 91.1 that we have is centered in Windsor. It is the same frequency as 91.1 out of San Francisco that they have. And technically, you've hit on one of the problems, right, that we've had all these decades, is that the only educational channel available to us in the 90s was 91.1 north of the KCSM 91.1 signal. So that is what has kept us hemmed in central and western Sonoma County, because we can't interfere with KCSM signal, which spills over, into South Santa Rosa. So we can only go about that far before we're in breach of the FCC guidelines. So that's one of the reasons that we've never been able to expand that signal, and they're not interested in selling that station. Nor do I think that we would want to step into that morass of problems, because they're based in the city. We're not interested in being based in the city. And they have such a strong and loyal jazz following, which we are also not interested in getting in the jazz business. So yeah.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. We have a question on the chat line. Rollie, I'll ask you to pick it up first. How can false news be best confronted? Okay. The people who are on this Zoom session pretty much understand real news versus false news. Okay. But we're almost all amazed at the number of people who seem to follow and believe in false news. What can be done about that?
Right. Yeah, well, we're, from the New York Times down to Sonoma West Publishers, we're wrestling with that question. But I think the number one weapon we have for us is transparency. Readers, those that willingly get duped and those that try to source out the original content of where they're getting their news, don't equally value or understand the transparency or how to follow that. But that's a key ingredient. And then the reputation of the trustworthiness. I mean, just the redundancy and the repetitive of getting stories right, and knowing those sources. But one thing we are seeing in our industry post-Trump presidency, and it happened very, very fast. And I've been following conversations inside of newsrooms at the New York Times and other journalism institutes. We're looking at really harder, detailed accountability. And you'll see it in reporting. I've seen it already in the Press Democrats coverage of certain items, rather than just saying someone believes in steal the vote. They go on with another paragraph about why that isn't true, about why the next paragraph says there are 60 court cases where those accusations were denied. There are 50 secretaries of states across the country that verified the count and the election. So journalists, we've changed how we're doing accountability and increasing our own accountability to ourselves and to each other. So
yeah. And, I also will pile on to that, what Rollie said. NPR learned, it took them a while, but about a year into the Trump administration, they learned to have somebody on the line after every single interview with a Trump administration official, to have a journalist waiting in the wings to counter what they said and to set people straight with the facts. Same with the NewsHour and with Judy Woodruff. So, here might be getting to the bigger question I think that you have, and I can't answer, and that is, how can we affect change in a population of people who do not watch or listen to us or read us, right? So we do not have their eyes or their ears or their minds or their hearts. They left us a long time ago because they didn't like the facts, right? They wanted their own alternative facts. And so now everybody has their own channel that's going to cater to whatever whims and fancies that they have. And I think on a national level, folks like myself and Rollie and the whole industry and the United States government to some degree is going to have to wrestle with accountability, like Rollie said. And we don't know how to do that in this strong First Amendment, everybody has a right to say whatever they want world that we have created, right? And we don't want that to change. But the responsibility has gone out the window. And anyway, now I'm just editorializing. I guess in short, I don't have an answer about how to get to those people that aren't listening to us and they aren't watching us. It's going to be much bigger than us to try to figure that out.
George, if I could follow up, kind of a plug. On Thursday, we hosted a Zoom program, How Democracies Die. And I would refer the participants here to go check out that 1 hour conversation between Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Lowell Bergman and Professor Daniel Ziblatt. They talked about fake news and how to encounter it and keep our democracy going. You cannot have a democracy if you have alternative sets of realities. And they talked for a good portion of that program on that very topic, and much more eloquently than I would. So you can find that on our YouTube channel at the Healdsburg Tribune.
Okay, I'm going to throw in a hopefully upbeat question. For each of you, what do you see as the most optimistic thing looking forward to the next year or two on media? What do you see as positive? Darren, I'll let you take that one first.
Oh my. Well, thinking from our perspective right here where we sit and not speaking on a national level of any kind, is that, I am very optimistic and encouraged about people having reevaluated public media in the past year during COVID. I think before COVID happened, we were really working hard on this relevancy issue, right? We had some folks who watched us and listened to us and rewarded us for that, and a lot of people that we couldn't get on board. And when people found themselves at home, and we found that our viewership numbers were going up, our listenership numbers were going up, our online engagement was going up, people reading and listening to our articles on the web was going up. And so there's a lot of optimism from me right now about that there's a need and a desire in the community that hopefully they've tapped into and understand as well as we're understanding that too. So I think once we can sort of lift a lot of these restrictions, working with Rollie and others to have big public events where we can get people together and talk and discuss and have panels. I think for us, that's a big part of what media is that interaction and that engagement with folks, and not just presenting what we think people need to see.
Okay, Rollie?
Well, we have across our 4 newspapers, 3 of which are in print suspension and digital only, and we're still only printing the Healdsburg Tribune on paper once a week. But we serve larger readership than we've ever served in 156 years and over recent times across all of the digital platforms and feeds. We have a monthly audience on our website, our news site, of over 150 to 175,000 individual unique people. Now, some of those people are counted twice because they come back each week. We have a big local news audience. And we have a great structure with the Sonoma County Local News Initiative, to do better engagement at a very community level. And then thirdly, we're 2 more points. We're seeing lots, just like we are doing. Here's a great example, what we're doing here on Sunday morning. We're talking about the news and how important it is and how we want to keep it alive and serving our communities. I'm in these conversations constantly all the time. And a few years ago, you know, people were taking me for granted, and all I'd ever hear is a complaint about, why didn't you print my press release? Now they're engaging. It's like, how can we work together so we get my press release printed? The conversation's changed a bit. And then lastly, and I heard this from our moderator Thursday on How Democracies Die, El Molino teacher John Greck, and I've seen this from the interns that we have in our newsroom. We have 4 high school interns that work with us. These are sharp, bright kids, and they get it. You know, the people being duped by Facebook and fake news aren't these young kids. They've got it mostly figured out. I mean, they are doing friending and Facebooking, but when they source out information, they're very aware and cognitive news consumers, and it's getting added to curriculums in the schools as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe the new generation, in our case, it's grandchildren or even great grandchildren, will bring us back to a better place. Okay, well, I think that's what we have for questions for now. Thank you both, gentlemen, and really appreciate it. Judy, what do we have scheduled for next week?
So
George.
next
Yeah.
week we have Sarah Gerber, who's speaking about how to grow old alone. Sometimes, despite your best thoughts and intentions, you know, a spouse dies or your children don't talk to you, and we find ourselves getting older, but it's not the end of the world, and there are things you can do to have a great life. And she's a great speaker.
Okay. Well,
Excuse
then
me,
we'll see you all-
George.
Yes.
George, one quick. So I was just looking at the Healdsburg Union YouTube channel, trying to find that talk that you mentioned, Rollie, about how democracies die. Couldn't find it. How do I find it?
If you send me an email, I'll give you a link.
What's your email?
Lynn, I'll
Yeah,
send
what-
you.
So it's Rollie, ROLLIE at sonomawest.com.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you both, gentlemen, and I appreciate it, and look forward to seeing more of you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I
Thank you
appreciate
for the invitation.